This is The Gig, and I'm Johnny O, and we do all things tech. Today I want to talk about the cloud, and what is it? What is it? It's online. That's all it is. End of segment. There we go. That's it. It just means online. Okay. Just joking. The cloud really does just mean online. For example, they call it cloud mail. They used to call it webmail. I think some places do that know what they're talking about. It's just webmail. Before Microsoft bought Hotmail, anyone could get a free email address from Hotmail, and they called that webmail. Now, at the time, if they wanted to make a system design for business guys, so business guys could understand, say, an infrastructure diagram, how your office connects from New York to San Francisco or Tokyo or something like this, they would make something called a topology diagram. And the topology diagram would go into great detail on how your network actually functions, but if it went to the internet and then terminated in Tokyo over a VPN or something, all they would do is they would have an arrow and a cloud, and the cloud would say internet on it, and then an arrow down to Tokyo or wherever your VPN is terminating. And that's where some marketing guy got the idea that the cloud should just mean internet or online. Okay, there, we're done. That's the cloud. That's where it came from. It came from IT topological diagrams. And I think it's a really stupid term, just so you know. You can just use the term online. It means the same thing. Online email, online storage, cloud storage, cloud mail, cloud services. They're just online services. That's all they mean. They're not cloud anything. Cloud doesn't mean anything. It's a marketing term that came about in between 2007 and 2008. By 2008, it was pretty widespread. I had guys at companies. Does your company offer cloud services? No, but we have online services. That's where the term came from. Pretty stupid term, if you ask me. But there's some really cool services that they call cloud services. For example, Microsoft Azure and Amazon hosting. It used to be that if you wanted to host a system for a company or an organization, you would have to go to a place called an IDC, Information Data Center. These are these big buildings. They look like indoor skating rinks. That's the size of them. Or indoor stadiums. And they're just full of computers. Floor after floor of computer. Bank after bank of computer. Now, you don't have to have a lot of computers to get IDC space. You rent it by the rack. You have those computer racks, okay? And you could rent a full rack or a half rack. I think the most or the least they would rent you was half a rack. And with the IDC guarantees the customer, they guarantee a secure space, which means no one will be able to break in and mess with your computers. They guarantee internet, okay, in redundancy, and they guarantee power in redundancy. The last thing they guarantee is temperature control. It's an environmentally controlled area with the humidity and the temperature totally controlled. So that's really what you're paying for. As far as the computers, they don't rent you computers. They'll set the rack there for you. They'll provide power, internet, and they'll even provide static IPs for you. And you take your servers, which you buy separately from another company, HP or IBM or Dell. You take them and you place them there with your own network gear. Because if you have a couple servers, you're also going to need a switch. Or if you have a lot of servers, you're going to need a lot of switches. You'll usually need a router, and you will most definitely need a firewall. So you will need layer 1, 2, and 3 for your network layers, and you will need your servers to provide that service. For example, you could run your own email server plus your own file server for your company. You would put the servers at the IDC, and you would set them up on your little network that you made, or your big network, depending on how many servers you have. You'd have a firewall, you'd have a switch, and you would definitely need layer 3 routing capabilities for a big organization. Now, you don't have to do that. You have Amazon and Azure. What Azure is, and Amazon, is they've taken all these hardware devices and they've implemented them as application layers. within their IDC, which means you don't have to rent IDC space, you don't have to buy servers, you don't have to buy network gear, but you do have to be able to configure these things. So they're all API layers. All the 3 networking layers, layer 1, 2, and 3, are APIs. The servers are APIs. Another thing you don't have to do, you don't have to buy server licenses. For example, if you were going to run Microsoft SQL, you would have to buy a SQL license. Now that SQL has to run inside of a server, so you have to buy a server license. Now, the licensing tiers for servers can get very expensive. They start off at 16 CPUs, 32 CPUs, 128 CPUs. And then there's enterprise. You can have as many CPUs as you think you need, 512. So you could literally have a server, a massive server with 512 CPUs in it, for example. You don't have to do any of that anymore. What's also included in these new services are the server. There's Windows Server, Windows SQL Server, Windows Enterprise Server. All that's included in the price. The bandwidth is included in the price. The electricity is included in the price. It's all included, all inclusive. So what you do is you pay a monthly fee, and you get the system the same size as you want, the only size that you want. If you only want 1 CPU and 16 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM or 4 gigs of RAM, that's what you get. If you want basic internet access, they'll offer that. If you want specialized internet access, they'll offer that. If you want 16 CPUs and 128 gigs of RAM and 10 terabytes of hard drive space, you can configure that just as easily as you could configure 1 CPU with 4 gigs of RAM and 10 terabytes of space. It doesn't matter. They're all software layers. All the networking is done separately, but within the same system, which means once you set up these servers with the server licenses you want, whether it's SQL Server or Enterprise Server or Server Pro, just basic server, once you set them up, then you got to network them. Now, the networking layers are deployed as application layers. So you don't have to mess around with Cisco PICs or iOS or anything like that. As long as you know how to network, you can basically figure it out. I took about 5 minutes, 10 minutes to figure it out. And I had servers up and running online in 20 minutes, the first time I logged into Azure. So as long as you're an engineer, you don't need the hardware anymore. You do need the engineering. So you do have to know what you're doing for networking and this sort of thing. They give you an outside IP for all your servers, or you can get multiple outside IPs for your servers. And you can use, obviously, as many inside IPs as you want. The networking layers are deployed as API. They're application layers. They're just APIs within the Azure or the Amazon infrastructure. And it's all software. You can access it with any browser. But once you do have your server set up, you can't really access them with your browser. Not really, unless you set up IIS or web server and you set it up to access them. But if you want machine level access, use Microsoft Remote Desktop or Terminal Services, just like you would with any other server. Okay? They are very secure. They're ISO 9000 certified, and they are completely redundant. They're beyond Tier 4 and beyond Tier 3 IDC space. What that means is when we had IDCs, which information data centers, these big server farms, they would be tiered. You could have a Tier 1, a Tier 2, a Tier 3. Usually big corporations would not host anything less than a Tier 3. And most of them were looking for Tier 4. What Tier 3 is any part of that infrastructure that they offer you, if any part of it goes down, they guarantee there's a redundant system to take up the slack. For example, if the power goes out for the main line, there's another line coming in or a generator that will make sure the power is not disrupted. If the internet goes down, say someone cuts a fiber cable somewhere, well, there's another place where the fiber comes in. There isn't just one connection coming in. That's what they mean. So if there's a catastrophe, it keeps running no matter what. That's Tier 3. Now, you take a Tier 3 and you copy everything on that IDC at another physical location, hundreds of miles away. That's tier 4. So if there's an earthquake and that entire IDC goes down, the other IDC just comes up instantly, and it has all the data that your tier 3 IDC had. That's called tier 4. Now, I know for Microsoft Azure, it actually goes beyond that. I can't speak for Amazon, but it works the same way. Amazon works the same way as Azure. I've used Amazon, but I've used Azure a lot. Now, what happens is there's dozens of Azure IDCs around the world. And you can imagine they take a few years to set up because all of these networking layers, all of these hardware layers, they're all implemented as APIs. They're just applications, okay, from your browser. So they take a while to set up. Now, what makes them go beyond tier 4 is there's, I think, a dozen or more, I think 16 Azure IDCs around the world. So there'll be one in San Francisco. I'm just saying, for example, one in New York, one in Canada somewhere, possibly one in South America somewhere, several in Asia, a few in Europe. Now, what happens, it doesn't matter where you are. If you're in Canada or the US or Europe or Asia and you set up an Azure account, everything that you do on that Azure account is copied to every other Azure IDC. So, if you're in Asia and you set something up in Azure, you have several servers, they're all networked, they're running fine, and there's an earthquake or a tornado or some catastrophe that destroys that IDC, like completely levels it, it doesn't matter. Your online services, your cloud services will still run because all the data at any Azure site, no matter where you configure it, is copied to every other Azure site on the planet. Which means, so if they have 16 Azure sites, 15 of them would fail. All over the world, you would still be running. You would still be running. So that's way beyond tier 4. I assume that Amazon, I don't know for sure, I assume that Amazon has the same configuration. That no matter where you configure your cloud services with Amazon, every other Amazon site will copy that data. It works for Azure, and that's how Azure is set up. I can't speak for Amazon. I'm just assuming that they're almost as good as Azure. I have used it, but very briefly. I set up one server, I think last year, very quickly. It was an email service, and I believe I put IIS on it. That was in Amazon. I have priced out systems in that, and I've priced out systems in Azure. Now, the last thing I want to say about these services, they can be expensive. Watch your bandwidth, okay? Don't go and rent the smallest Azure server that you could possibly configure with, say, 1 CPU and 4 gigs of RAM, and then put all your torrents on it, or all of your streams on that, expect to stream off that bandwidth. No. They thought you might do this when they set it up. So therefore, if you are using massive amounts of bandwidth, they will bill you for it. They don't want people serving all the torrents on the internet off of one of their servers. They will bill you for it. It will be expensive, no matter how big your server is. So, now, there was a complaint, I think, by one company I heard of. Oh, they charge a premium for bandwidth. Well, when your company is using more bandwidth, they're going to charge you more money for it. They don't know what you're doing with that bandwidth. They just see the bandwidth meter, and they charge you for it. It could be massive amounts of file sharing within a huge organization, a huge company or something. Or for all they know, it could be torrent sharing through your corporate system. They don't know. But you're going to get charged a premium if you're using massive amounts of bandwidth. And you should be, because I know what's going to happen if they didn't do that. All these torrent guys or downloaders or uploaders will put all their stuff on there, and they'll just be getting all this bandwidth for free. So they do charge a premium for bandwidth. As long as your company is working within reason, you're running your email service, you're running some file services, you have a few other accounting systems in that running off it, the bandwidth will just be pretty standard charge. But when it starts going through the roof, they're going to charge you through the roof. Okay, so that's a cloud service. The latest cloud service, I would say, would be Azure and Amazon hosting. Okay, those are the biggest cloud services you'll think of. or I can think of. The other ones are, instead of setting up your own server, you might get a service off of a cloud company, right? That's where you just have a login account and you create your email accounts for your company. Maybe there's 4 or 5 or something like that. That's a service. They call it cloud. It's not really cloud. Nothing is really cloud. It just means online. It's something online. That's all cloud service means, okay? I don't know why they don't just go back to saying online. It makes little difference to me, okay? So cloud is just cloud. Oh, if you use a Mac, you should put everything on the cloud because your hardware is junk and you need the cloud anyways. It's probably invented for them. It's probably a Mac guy that invented the term, a marketing Mac guy. I can see one of those Mac guys doing that. Oh, it's the cloud. It's not online. It's the cloud. Oh, great. Let's go to the cloud. We're not going to the internet. We're going to the cloud. No, totally stupid. Okay? It's online. Cloud just means online. I'm Johnny O. Subscriptions down below. Arguments down below. Questions, comments. I'll get to your questions. I'll get to your comments if I like them. If I don't, forget it. I'll just ignore you.